I reached 80% comprehension in native Japanese content in just 2 months. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how I did that. And so here's a screenshot of my Netflix. So this is just a random anime that I was watching. I had Migaku pulled up, and what I was doing was, as I was watching with subtitles, anytime there was like a word that was like a grunting sound or whatever that wasn't an actual word, I just pressed ignore on it, obviously. And then any word that was like an actual word that I knew, I marked off that I knew it. Everything else I left unknown, right? And so I understood 80% of that particular anime episode that I was watching, which is incredible after only studying Japanese for 2 months. Okay, so here's my exact process. So the first thing that I did was I did kanji cards, right? Because normally I wouldn't recommend like doing kanji study, but for me, my main goal in Japanese is to be able to read well. And so that's why I'm doing kanji study. So I did 1,193 kanji cards over the course of these 2 months. So the way I'm doing the kanji study is through a course on Migaku, which is a language learning platform. I'm not sponsored by them, but I do use their service a lot. And so their kanji course has a total of 1,268 cards. So I'm almost completely done with their kanji course. And it covers the 800 most common kanji used in Japanese, which is a lot of kanji, right? There's 1,200 cards, but there's only 800 kanji covered. And the 400 or so-ish cards that are not actually kanji are components, right? And those are individual components that make up entire kanji. So if you're kind of unclear about what's happening here, basically I'll explain it really easily. On the cards, there's a kanji in the front, right? And my goal is to recall the meaning of the kanji, right? So I flip the card over, and then on the back is just the meaning, and there's a couple other things too, but I'm really only grading myself based on whether or not I understood the meaning of the kanji, right? And so I'll give you an example. This word here, musume, it means daughter, right? And so what I would do is first it would teach me this part right here of the kanji, which means woman. Then maybe the next day or so, it would teach me this part, which means good, right? So I would learn these two components individually. And then like the next day or so, it would teach me musume, which is the kanji for daughter, right? And it would teach me that by creating a mnemonic story to help me remember that woman plus good equals daughter. So for example, it would say something like, oh, if you wanted to have somebody as your daughter, you would want a good woman, right? And that's how you'd remember that good plus woman equals musume, which is daughter. So that's how the kanji were learned. Basically only learning the meaning, not the actual way to read it. So I would just learn that this particular kanji means daughter, but I wouldn't know how to read it. And so next, I did vocabulary cards. And now these are really where the bulk of my progress was made, on these vocabulary cards. So how it would work is it would give me sentences, and each sentence would introduce one unknown element, right? And so this is huge. So I started with the kanji deck first, and then I ended up doing the vocab card second. So I already knew that this particular kanji here meant daughter. I just didn't know how to read it. So then it would give me a sentence here full of things that I already knew, but I didn't know this particular thing. So I would read it as Jibun no musume ni wa I'm forgetting that one. What the heck? Shiawase ni natte hoshii. That means like I hope my daughter becomes happy or something, right? And so I would flip over the sentence card, and I would see the definition for this and the reading for that. So I would know the reading and the definition. And there was audio on every single card. And so after flipping the card, I usually would never check the definitions if I'm reviewing the card because I already know the card. I was optimizing for instant understanding. So if I didn't instantly understand it, I would just fail it. And so I would check the back of the card only so that the audio would play. So I was getting audio immersion. So I didn't make any bad habits with pronunciation in my head. So 2,101 cards total over the course of the 64 days that I have been studying Japanese means that I'm doing an average of 32.82 cards per day, which might seem a little bit low given how much I did, but I had 2 weeks of review only. So on a lot of days, I was even doing 80 new cards a day, right? But it averaged out to 32 because I had 2 review only weeks and maybe a couple of days here and there where I just did reviews only because I didn't have time to do the new cards. So besides the flashcards, which were like 90% of what I did in Japanese was literally just the Migaku course cards. I spent tons of time on the cards. If you want to know more about why I believe that was a good idea, I made a whole video on like breaking language learning rules. I'm going to put that in the description. That video will kind of explain my thought process as to why I chose to do such a flashcard heavy approach to learning Japanese. But besides the flashcards, on the first month, I went over this in my month 1 update. I watched 11 episodes of Death Note, 2 episodes of Psyche K, and I read about 20-ish NHK Easy news articles. When I say watched, I mean like watched with subtitles. All right, so that's how I did that. This month, I started a new series called Gachi Yakuta or something like that. I don't even know, but this one is pretty good, honestly. This is like my type of like show to watch. It was pretty addicting, and it got to the point where sometimes I was supposed to do flashcards, but I ended up watching this a little bit anyways. But overall, I think the time spent with this series was well spent. I also went through the transcript of JoJo's Part 1, and I was just like reading that with audio. And I watched one more episode of Psyche K. So not too much input relative to the amount of flashcards that I was getting. So that's the entirety of my input over the course of these 2 months. And the whole time I was watching it, I wasn't making any flashcards. Obviously, I already had my flashcards from the course. I was just looking up unknown words. Only like every minute or so I would do a lookup, not like constantly looking up. And if there was a sentence that had like 5 unknown words, I wouldn't look up any of them. I would just keep on going, right? I would only look up words if there was like 1 or 2 unknown words per sentence, and only like once every minute or two I would look up words. And so that's how I did it. So other than that, I was doing some listening. I tried at first like doing passive listening, but I found that for me personally and for my goals, it wasn't very effective, because passive listening is great for increasing your skill of being able to listen and allowing you, if you have like a foothold in the language, you can actually pick up some words by doing that. But for me, I don't really care about my ability to listen in isolation, because my main goal with Japanese is reading. And additionally, I'm not really at the level where I can pick out words just from listening to them, right? So for me, there was very little benefit from just passive listening. There's definitely benefit, but just not that much, right? And so I decided to listen to like Japanese teachers instead. So Game Gengo is like a YouTube channel where he basically just explains different words in in Japanese. They are technically, like, a lot of the videos I was watching was like grammar explanations, but like I wouldn't even consider it grammar study, right? Because the grammar that Game Gengo was explaining was literally just like words. It's just like a word that they call grammar because the JLPT classifies it as a grammar point, but in reality, it's just a word that can be used in a lot of different circumstances. So that was one thing I listened to. But the main thing that I really spent a lot of time listening to, and I would say like, I said a lot of time, like maybe like a couple hours just passively listening to, was this YouTube channel called Kaname Naito. All right, this guy is a Japanese teacher and he's really good. Like, his videos are top quality. If you're learning Japanese, I would highly recommend watching specifically his like words playlist where he explains vocabulary words. It's really, really good. Basically what he'll do is he'll take a word that's like pretty common but has like a lot of distinct and kind of potentially complicated usages that foreigners often mess up, and he'll give you like so many example sentences and he'll explain it super, super well. And so not only was this kind of comprehensible input, because a lot of his video is just him speaking Japanese, giving example sentences, but it's also really drilling down the meaning and kind of sticking one word into my head, which as a beginner, one word is huge, right? And so that's why there's like some words that I learned from him that I haven't even learned in my Migaku course yet, that was coming up in my immersion, which is really good. And then additionally, I pretty much stopped doing pitch accent training entirely. I did it for like maybe 30 minutes or so total, maybe an hour even, like total time in the first month that I was doing Japanese, but I'm pretty much just completely stopped. I can hear the pitch now, which honestly I think is just good enough. Like, I have the ability to hear it and distinctively tell and differentiate different pitch patterns in my head. And so that's all I really need to be able to do. And with output training, the whole time, these entire 2 months, I haven't done any, because again, my main goal is reading. So I haven't done any output training. So besides what I've done this past 2 months, I do have a little bit of a history with Japanese that I'm going to explain to you in a little bit of detail here, just so that you can accurately have like expectations for, if you follow the exact same routine as me, what you could potentially expect, or whether there will be discrepancies in our results. So before I started studying Japanese, maybe about I believe from 2020 to 2023, I would say that like 3 or 4 year period, maybe like 3-year period, I was doing a lot of watching anime. I didn't do any lookups, and the Japanese language wasn't even on my mind. I had no interest in language learning at all at that point. I was just a nerd. And so I just watched a ton of anime in Japanese with English subtitles. Easily 2,000 hours plus just watching anime. So that was just a ton of time passive listening to the language. And I ended up picking up some words from that as well. Not on purpose, of course, but you just like, with that much amount of anime and that much amount of listening exposure, even if it's passive, you're still going to get like something out of that, right? There was then a time where I was going to go to Japan. I've talked about this a ton on the channel, but for about a month, I tried studying Japanese, and this was before I really knew a lot about language learning. And so I studied a little bit of kanji in isolation. I studied grammar, and I studied numbers a lot, and that's pretty much all I did. The only thing that I remember from that period is numbers 1 through 10,000. I remember how to say that because I did a lot of drilling numbers with a tutor to practice for like shopping and stuff like that. And I also remembered like the basic sentence structure of how words are ordered and things like that. That's literally pretty much all I remembered from that like 1 month period of study that I did like a year ago, right? But I think one really big thing that I got out of that 1 month period and then subsequently studying deeply how to learn languages was that I learned what doesn't work for me, right? During that time, that 1 month period, I was trying to memorize conjugation tables. I now know that that's a huge waste of time and even potentially like bad for your language study, right? I was also trying to study words out of context, which is pretty awful and pretty inefficient. And I also tried to do RTK and not like the way I described earlier. I mean, like just taking the actual RTK book and going through the entire thing, which if you know anything about RTK, you know that that's brutal and that's not the most efficient way to spend your time when you're first learning Japanese, right? And so because I already tried all of these things, and then after that, I really studied language acquisition theory and effective ways to learn a language, I basically was able to avoid a ton of pitfalls that oftentimes Japanese learners fall into this time around. And that's like a huge advantage that I had going into this period of like Japanese study. Also, I do speak Vietnamese. So I do know, like, I have a lot of firsthand experience with trying out language learning tactics and things like that by doing Vietnamese. And there was actually a couple of words that like obviously like came from like Chinese that were pretty much almost the exact same in Japanese as they were in Vietnamese. There's only 2 words like that I was able to find so far. In Japanese, I think this is read kekkong, like which means like marriage, and in Vietnamese it's get hong, right? So it's like almost the same thing, right? In Japanese, this is I think it's like taido, and then in Vietnamese taido, which is like this means marriage, and then this means attitude. So it's like the same word in Japanese and Vietnamese, just the accent is different, which is crazy. Another way that Vietnamese helped me was that there's 2 words in Japanese that oftentimes foreigners kind of find tricky to grasp. One of them is jibun, which means like it means oneself, right? And it's very confusing because it can be used as a first person pronoun, like to refer to yourself, like jibun no, like to talk about yourself. It can also be used to talk about like oneself, like he's obsessed with himself. You would use jibun for himself, right? And then it's also in like set phrases that it can be used, right? So it has a lot of really complicated usages, and foreigners often mess this up. This is actually the exact same thing as the Vietnamese word mun, right? It's like the exact same word in terms of how it can be used and everything. So jibun was like super quick for me to pick up. Same thing with kaeru, right? In Japanese, that means like returning, but specifically like you're going home or like going back to where you like come from, right? Specifically. And Vietnamese has the exact same word for this, which is ve, right? And so it's really cool that like there were the exact equivalents that like there's no exact equivalent in English. So monolingual English speakers will often mess it up, but there was Vietnamese equivalents that I was able to pick up on with the nuance of these words. And then finally, like a couple of obvious things, like pitch accent in Japanese was much easier for me to wrap my head around because Vietnamese is a tonal language. So I had to learn tones, and compared to tones, pitch accent is actually like much easier in my opinion. Particles, a lot of English speakers, because English, I don't think English has particles in the same sense as Japanese and Vietnamese do. But because I learned a lot of particles in Vietnamese, I was able to like, my brain kind of knew what particles were and how they worked. Like in Vietnamese and Japanese, there's particles like that you'd stick on the end to like draw the speaker's attention to a specific thing or to like add like an emphasis to what you're saying. So that, which doesn't exist in English. So that's one advantage that I had. And then another thing was like choosing pronouns. Like oftentimes, English speakers will get confused over like the multiple different pronouns in that system in Japanese, but Vietnamese probably has the most complicated pronoun system out of any language ever. And so because Vietnamese has such a complicated pronoun system, the Japanese one was just super easy in comparison for me. So those are ways that Vietnamese, like knowing Vietnamese actually helped me learn Japanese, which is super interesting to me. And so one thing that's really cool that I did was I had ChatGPT realistically assess my reading ability to see like where I'm actually at. So it gave me this approximation of JLPT to CEFR, if you're not familiar with the JLPT, but I assumed I was somewhere around here, right? And so I asked ChatGPT to give me an N4 prompt to read, and then based off of my abilities, tell me what level that I'm at. So this was the prompt that ChatGPT gave me to read. This is N4 or A2 level. So I read this whole thing. Here it is in English if you want to pause and kind of read it so you can see like what level I'm at and the types of things that I'm struggling with. So this is what I read. And there was only like 5 points that I didn't understand. So it was this, which means like while, like you do something while doing something else. This word here, which means like too much or overly in such a way. The word for slowly, I wasn't able to understand. This word, I knew the meaning. So like when I read it, like I knew what it meant, but I wasn't able to pronounce it. Like I didn't know the reading of the kanji. And then this word, I just forgot it in the moment. But then when I looked it up later, I was like, oh, I know that word. I just couldn't like recall it in the moment that I was reading that ChatGPT passage. And so I asked ChatGPT, I told it everything that I wasn't able to know from that entire paragraph. And it gave me this assessment that assessed my reading level as mid N4, which means like mid A2 level reading, which honestly, like after 2 months is really, really good. But there are a ton of words, again, that aren't in that like N4 story that I know, right? And specifically because the Migaku course is based off of the most common words that show up on Japanese Netflix, right? And the show that I watched was obviously on Netflix. So there is like a kind of way where I'm actually like optimizing my study in a way to be able to understand Netflix shows as much as possible. And because the show that I had 80% of comprehension on was like a shonen show, which means that there's like a lot of fighting. There was like a lot of like grunting and stuff that like, you know, obviously I just pressed ignore on there, which lowered my percentage of unknown words. And then on top of that, like because I've watched so much shonen anime in the past, there's just like a lot of words that I was naturally able to pick up from that. And so like there was a lot of words that I didn't even learn in the course, but I remembered from my days of just watching a ton of shonen anime. So overall, that's kind of where I'm at right now with Japanese. I did achieve 80% comprehension on that one episode, but overall my level is A2, like middle of the ground A2, but which is still really, really solid for only 2 months of study. So hopefully this was educational and you were able to take something from this, like whether it be like the way that I was able to study kanji, the amount of flashcards that I did, et cetera, et cetera. Next month, I'm going to be doing a 3-month update. And I'm even going to be doing like speaking demonstration as well. And I'm not going to study output at all. I'm just going to do like 3 months of solid input and flashcards and all that. And we're going to see like how I'm able to speak and stuff like that. So I'll do after 3 months, I'll do like a live reading demonstration where I have ChatGPT generate it during the video and I read off like, and you're able to see me reading live. And then I'll do a speaking demonstration as well. And you'll be able to see like, after completing the entire Migaku course, all like 4,000 or something crazy like that flashcards, and all this time studying, how much, what true level I'm able to be at. All right, so if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel. You'll be able to see that. Thank you so much for watching this video.